Thank you all very much for coming. I'll just start with acknowledgement of country. I am in Camperdown, which is the Jaganwurrun land. Um, and I'd just like to acknowledge that the Aboriginal elders are the traditional custodians of the land, and that they always have and will always will be the traditional custodians. Yes, just pay my respects to them. But
Thanks.
yeah, I'll pass it over to you, Lucinda. Thank you very
Mm,
much.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and nice to see you again too, Prue. It was really great meeting a bunch of people from Camperdown and probably surrounds on the weekend on our Saturday session, and looking forward to talking to some of you here tonight. Um, we are going to be talking about how to make our homes more comfortable and energy efficient. That's the purpose. So, as Prue said, just do ask questions. The point of it is to help you and support you in knowing what to do. So, no question is silly. And yeah, you can put a question in the chat. I actually can't see the chat. So, if there's something in the chat that's very relevant. Can you interrupt me, Prue, and let me know what the question is? And otherwise, I'll check them all at the end.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. So my name is Lucinda, and whoops, I'm going to move my little pointy thing off the slide. I have been an energy assessor for quite a long time, probably going on 10 years now. And what that means is people ring me and I come over to their place and sit at the table and basically say, how's your house working? Is it too cold, too warm? What do you want from it? How do you use it? What's going to work for you best? And then we make a bit of a plan with them of what they can do to make it more efficient. And I just absolutely love my job because I feel like it's a really useful thing that I can help people with. And I get to meet a lot of really interesting people from all walks of life all over the place, and I enjoy that. So I, sort of end the day often feeling like I've made a couple of new friends because we've had a chat about whatever. Um, and the rest of my time I spend training and presenting because, as you will soon discover, I can talk about this topic till the cows come home, so to speak. Um, Today, we'll begin by just setting the scene a little bit around comfort and efficiency and what we're aiming at. Then we'll look at the things we can do to our buildings or our houses to make them just better to keep us warm in winter. The same things go for keeping us cool in summer, but I'm going to just try and focus my suggestions for winter warmth at the moment because of what it's like outside. And then we'll look at appliance efficiency and talk about the most efficient heating options. And then we'll finish up with a few further resources and things that you can do. So if we begin by setting the scene, I'm a huge believer that every single home and household is different. I don't think there's any such thing as the right way to do things or that everyone has to do certain steps in order to be more comfortable and efficient because we all just differ so much and we experience comfort differently. We use our homes completely differently. Some of us, might be working from home and have multiple people working from home multiple days a week, and others are out all day. And so the things you're going to be doing might differ widely, even if the house is the same house. Different people living there might treat it differently. So I think that the first thing to do is just have a think about where you're at, where you're trying to go, how you use the home and what's important to you. And perhaps pinpoint if there's anything that you need to work around, like health things or budget or things that you just can't stand the look of or that you really like the look of. Because for a really good example is it's better in terms of thermal efficiency or comfort to have a curtain over a window. But if you've got a beautiful window that looks out onto the garden that gives you huge joy, then I don't think you should cover it. I'm a gardener. I want to see that stuff. So then you just go, okay, that's something that isn't for me, but I would instead do something else that someone else wouldn't consider doing. So there's always options is what I'm trying to say. To me, I always look at comfort and efficiency in three different sort of groups. One is all about the building shell, and that's everything that separates us inside from what's outside. And really what we want to know is how well does it keep our winter warmth in and the summer heat out? And there's a whole stack of ways that you can make it better at that. Then there's the appliances that we use. So first step is to make your building shell as good as possible so that you don't need the appliances for heating and cooling so much. But if you do then need heating and cooling appliances, how efficiently do they do what you want them to do? And then attached to both of those is how you use them, because you could have a really efficient building shell and really efficient appliances, and you could use them in a very inefficient way. And the opposite applies too. You might be in a rental that doesn't have a very good building shell or appliances, but you can use them in a really clever way that is still going to make work better for you. So there's something for everyone. And if you try and match up those three categories and do something in each of them, that's really beneficial. Now, this slide I've put in purely to give a little bit of a tangible look at what improving our homes can mean. Because when we talk about conserving water or not wasting food, they're physical things you can see. But when it comes to energy, we can't see it. And a lot of people really don't have a good picture in their heads of how different things use energy. When I do my home assessments, I use a tool called the scorecard, and it gives a rating and a cost rating for a house. And so these star ratings that you see on the picture relate back to different costs. The Victorian average is the 3 stars, which is $1,800 a year on the main fixed appliances. So that's heating, cooling, lighting, and hot water. But if I go into a home that's 1 star, it could be $5,000 or more just on those things. So this is what you stand to gain. If we can bring you from, a 1 star or even a 3-star home to a 6-star home, you really are making a very tangible saving. It's not just, a dollar here or there. It's potentially thousands of dollars a year. And sometimes for not a big cost either. That's another thing I'm very big on, is that you don't need to have a big budget to do a lot of this stuff. So we'll begin now with looking at the building shell and how you can make it better at keeping the heat where you want it. And I love the saying that the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use, because you can change electricity companies every year if you want to get a slightly lower energy rate, but you'd be way better off, in my opinion. I'm not saying not to do that, but definitely focusing in on how you can improve your house and your appliances so you're not needing that energy in the first place. And that's just a saving into the future forever. These charts show if a home is uninsulated, where the losses could potentially be from in winter and the heat gains in summer. So you can see that it's a bit of an even mix, although ceiling winter loss and summer gain is probably the higher. Yeah, that's the highest. Actually, summer gain is window heat gain is pretty high as well. But it's just an interesting way to look at, okay, what's going on in my home? Have I got good ceiling insulation? And if I haven't, what could I stand to gain by putting it in? And air leakage is possibly something people aren't expecting, that up to 25% of the heat loss in a home in winter could be just from air leakage, which is purely because it's allowing your warmed winter air out, and then you have to pay to have a heater to warm it up again. How does heat move in and out of our homes? Well, probably probably the simplest example is the radiation from the sun's rays beats down on the house and heats up the ceiling, the walls, the windows, the window frames. That's radiant heat. Then that heat is conducted through those materials into whatever else is touching them. So through that wall, potentially, I'm just going to, could you do some muting if need be, Prue? Okay,
I'll
so
try.
no,
If I can work it out.
I've
Sorry.
already done it.
Oh, you've done it.
But
Oh,
just,
good. Thank you.
So then the conduction is when two materials are touching and the heat just moves through them. Actually, I forgot to say a really important thing, which is that heat always moves from where it's more warm to where it's less warm. So if that sunlight is touching the wall, then that wall is warmer on the outside and that heat will just automatically try and move through the wall till it's on the cooler inside. It's just what happens with heat. The same with the windows and the window frame. If the sun touches them, it will just automatically move through and into our homes. And then with the example of the window or the window frame, that heat's gone in, it's inside, and then the air current comes into play. That's the convection, where the air will flow across the window, pick up some heat, and then gradually move it around the house. So it will keep moving until that heat is evenly distributed. So what we want to do with our building is find different ways of managing the way heat is moving in and out. So the first thing that I think is worthwhile doing, it's actually one of the simplest things, and in some ways, well, in some situations, it's not even really an upgrade at all. It's just a change in the way that you think. So it's about thinking of your home in zones. And this is how we used to think of our homes, because we used to have just, probably a heater in the main living space. That's how it was done. Whereas nowadays we tend to heat really large areas and almost expect that every room is heated, even the bathroom and the toilet and everywhere. So what I'd suggest people do is just go back to thinking of how different areas of their house are used, and then try and make it so that you can heat and cool those individual areas just as you need them, not automatically the whole place. And this can also be identifying areas that you use the most and maybe focusing your upgrades on those areas. That reduces the cost as well. And then also thinking about areas you don't use or that might be problems. So there could be a room that's just really drafty and got an external door and a drafty window, and you might just try and work out how you can separate that out so that those drafts aren't impacting everything else. Zoning can be really simple, and these are all pictures from clients' houses where they've just come up with simple ways to separate out areas. The two top images I thought were brilliant. It's whenever someone has a two-story home, the most common problem they have is usually the living space is at the ground floor and the bedrooms are upstairs. So you turn on the heater for the living space and all the heat goes up the stairs and you lose it, and it's beautiful upstairs and no one's there. So they've just added this curtain on a ceiling track, and that's separating out that top bit, which is brilliant. The two at the bottom are examples of people where they've just got this extendable telescopic pole. These are both those, and then a lightweight curtain, and hung them off. And that might be separating the whole sort of front of the home from the rear living space. The smaller the area you're heating or cooling, the less it's going to cost to do it. Now, draft proofing, I'm only going to talk a little bit about draft proofing because we have a session on Wednesday that's a whole hour dedicated to it. So hopefully you'll be able to come along to that and we'll explore it in more detail. But what we're doing is we're reducing the loss and gain of warm air by physically blocking gaps. And because we're physically blocking gaps, we can do that in a number of ways. So I'll often say to people, you could stick some scrunched up newspaper in something, or you can buy a beautifully designed draft sealing thing. If it's filling a gap, it's draft sealing, and all the rest is aesthetics. And sure, it's nicer to do something that looks really beautiful, but it's not essential if the aim is to block the gap. If you have an older home, it's just going to be more drafty, partly because it might have moved around a bit, but also because they're older, the home, they had more built-in drafts, especially if they're pre-90s. Pre-90s houses tend to have wall vents and ceiling vents and vented bathroom windows and things like that, because it's not, a lot of people think it's to the walls need those wall vents, but they don't. It's actually for the type of heating that we had that wasn't very safe. So the combustion products weren't very safe. So now that we don't usually have those, you can draft seal. Having said that, I have got a slide in a second about when you shouldn't draft seal a room. I think the easiest ways of finding drafts are generally just the simple ways, which is feeling them or seeing them, literally seeing light through something. Or another good way is waiting for a cold, windy day, which shouldn't be too hard to come by at the moment, and just lighting an incense stick or lighting a candle and then walking around the house, and you'll see where that incense smoke or the candle is blowing. So that's a really good method as well. People often say, but don't we need all those gaps and cracks to have fresh air? And the answer is we definitely do need fresh air, but we want to be able to control that fresh air. So what we always say is drafts are the uncontrolled entry of fresh air or the exit of conditioned air, but ventilation is when we control the entry of fresh air and get rid of the condensation. So they are both about the movement of air, but it's whether or not we can control them is the big thing. That image shows that just the process of living means that we add moisture to the air. And there's nothing we can do about that because we all have to, even just breathing adds moisture to the air. So we do need ways to get rid of it. And also we need to probably think about how much we're adding and if we're adding unnecessary amounts of moisture. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the draft proofing session. And here's that slide I mentioned just about if you do happen to have a space heater in a room, so a gas or a wood heater that just heats one space, then if it's an open fluid heater, which most of them are, you just need to be more careful with draft sealing. Have it checked, get the flue cleaned, that sort of thing. If it's a gas space heater, you really should get it checked every 2 years for carbon monoxide. Yeah, to me, it's a good motivation to potentially not have a gas or wood space heater inside, but that's not an option for everybody, just as long as you take care when you have them. Now, insulation is sort of it's a large part of the house. So if you didn't have an insulated house, then the losses through the ceiling, walls and floor that are uninsulated are up to 80% of the potential heat loss in winter, which is really massive, isn't it? And that's one of the biggest differences between older houses and newer houses is the older ones just didn't have the same levels of insulation as we do now. Having said that, though, newer houses can be problematic with insulation as well if it hasn't been installed well. So it's not an automatic that an older house is poor and a newer house is good. What we want to look for with insulation is the thickness and the coverage. Now, the thickness we pretty much explain as R value. R value just stands for the resistance to heat transfer through that material. And the way that insulation reduces heat transfer is just by holding little pockets of air in the insulation, and that stops that heat conducting through the material. If we were building a house new now, we would be installing insulation at around this level, around 4.5. In the, say, probably 10 years ago, it would have been around here, and 10 years before that would have been around here, and 10 years before that would have been around here. So we've just been gradually upgrading what we think is a good amount. But you can see on this chart that by the time you've got to R5, you've really reduced any ability for heat to transfer through the ceiling insulation or through the insulation. So really the point where you would upgrade it is if you have none or anywhere down to here. If you had insulation that looked like this, that's probably around here, and that would be fine. It's nice even coverage, and it's got no gaps. This would be more like R4.5. It's double layer, and you can see it's got something like this underneath and then another layer added over the top. Oh, there was something I forgot to mention. Couple of things actually. One is that if you do need more insulation, often there's no need to take out what you already have. You just put another layer on top. And the other thing is that there's a new rebate coming out in 2026 for insulation in the ceiling. The first focus is on houses that don't have any insulation at all. So that's sort of a shame because a lot of houses have some, but it's just very, very poor. But on the other hand, if you have none at all, this is your heat transfer. So it's super important that those people get help first. So keep that in mind. The most common problem that happens with insulation, especially in the roof, is gaps left by trades. And the reason that matters so much is that gaps in insulation that add up to just 5% of the total coverage, half the value of the insulation. So if you start with R4 insulation, but you had this many gaps around different things, you would actually only have the equivalent of R2. And sometimes this means that it's a really simple thing to fix up, especially in a new house. You might have actually really pretty nice insulation, but it's just had people up there moving it around and not putting it back where it should be. So this is then a chance to just relay it in the correct way, and you get better protection. I found out on Saturday that you guys can borrow a thermal imaging camera from the library. Is it all the libraries, Prue? And is it there just one in Camperdown? Or?
It's at a few of the libraries. I'm not too sure which ones, but if you can see it online, like if you go into the library catalogue, and then also if you talk to the library staff, and I'm pretty sure they can, like the books, they can move it around the libraries if need be.
Brilliant. Yeah. So they've got instructions in them too. So this might seem a bit weird, these pictures, but they will have instructions how to use them. And the key is that you work out what season it is, and then the bluey sort of purpley bits indicate cold, and the orangey yellowy bits indicate heat. So these ones show insulation that's missing. You can see that it's cold weather because this is coldness coming through the gaps, and the same here. Whereas this one is summer, and this is where there's a bit of missing insulation and there's all this heat coming through the ceiling. This is an example of it's got the thermal image alongside the regular image, and you can see that a downlight is there, and that's probably why that has been taken out when the trade has installed it. You can do your own insulation, but it's not something you just go up and do without any planning. There are lots of hazards in the roof, as well as the hazard of being on a ladder, falling off a ladder or falling through the roof. So just make sure if you are going to attempt it that you really have investigated what you need to do to stay safe. Now with wall insulation, there's a way you can have it pumped in now. So if you were renovating, then sure, take off, you're probably taking off plaster or weatherboards anyway, and that's a great time to put in bulk insulation in the walls. But if you're not doing that, this is another way to do it, which is a lot less intrusive, because they can generally do the whole job from outside without even stepping inside at all. If you've got a brick veneer house, they drill holes in between the bricks. If you've got a weatherboard house, they drill little holes in the weatherboards and they pump in this white snowy stuff. It's glass fibre, loose fill glass fibre. If you've got a tiled roof, they can usually do some from the top, but they won't be able to do all of it from the top, because this is what they're aiming for, this picture on the right. And you can imagine they would have got some up here, but as soon as they reach the window, it gets blocked. So then they need another hole here, one here, one here, one here, one here. So you never really know how many holes you're going to need, because each house is different and the way the walls are constructed, but they would put one in each spot. The reason I've included these pictures is because if for some reason you can't install from outside, or if, for example, you were just about to completely repaint the inside of your house, then it might be easier to do this than to do it through outside weatherboards and then have to repaint outside. Yeah, so, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that this method can be really good for flat roofs where there's just a small cavity but no access hatch or anything. So then you can drill holes in the roof plaster and pump in the insulation that way. With underfloor insulation, it's really important in some situations, but not in all. So maybe I should say at this point that in every house I go to, I'll be looking at all of these aspects of the house. And there's a sort of a general rule of thumb of how I would look at them, which starts with zoning and draft proofing and then goes to insulation. But then different things will just go up and down the list depending on what that house is like and what the situation is with the people that live there. So underfloor insulation is one of those ones that often gets shunted right down the bottom of the list because it's just not so relevant for that place. If you have a home that's fairly close to the ground and it's all bricked in at the sides and you've got carpets or floating floorboards, I probably wouldn't bother with underfloor insulation. But if you're, oh, here's an example. If you're up on a hill with big open underfloor and just floorboards between you and the swirling air under the house, that's when it becomes much more important. So it's not really possible to say who should do it until you know what the subfloor space is like and what the floor coverings are like. If you do it, make sure you buy insulation that is meant for underfloors, because it's going to be thicker than ceiling insulation. You want it to not sag, and you need to attach it either by stapling it in at the sides or by strapping it. You definitely don't want to just shove it in and then hope that it's going to stay there, because it will always fall out with gravity. Okay, now windows. Window upgrades help us in all sorts of different ways. There's so many aspects to windows, and sometimes we just think of a window as a window, but we forget that there's frames and glass and blinds and curtains and shading, and all of those things make a difference to them. We've got a whole session just on windows that's this Thursday, so spread the word about that and hopefully you can come along. To go over each of the elements though briefly, the first place usually to start thinking is about window treatments, and that means internal coverings, blinds, curtains, anything that you put over the windows. And what you want to do with those is stop air flowing as much as you can across the glass, because when air touches that glass in the frame, if it's summer and it's hot outside, that heat will have conducted through the glass in the frame, and then the air swings past, picks up the heat and starts to warm up your room. And in the winter, when you've got nice warm air inside, it swings past the window, which is cold, and it drops off your heat. So you're either losing or gaining heat through the window. By putting a good window treatment over them, you just prevent that happening or reduce it significantly. Lined curtains are always a good option because they're just really good at making a protective cover across the window. But these are also good. They're honeycomb blinds. And in this instance, they've put one honeycomb blind inside the window rebate and then another one on top for extra protection. So that's a great one. And this is another option where you hang the curtain from the ceiling so that the ceiling acts as a pelmet. Pelmets are really important and they actually double the protectiveness of the curtains. And I want to mention that Sustainability Victoria did a report in 2019 that found that if you put thick, close-fitting drapes and a pelmet on a window, it's a similar effect as double glazing the window. So don't feel that your only course of action is to double glaze your windows. You can do a lot with window treatments as well. If you do want to go ahead and do some glazing upgrades, then there's actually a huge range you can do. There's really what you want to do is add an air gap between two panels. And that, the same thing, you know how we were talking about the heat, say the sunlight touching that window and moving through. Well, if there's an air gap, it prevents it doing that. So that's what we're trying to do, is add an air gap. And because that's all it is, you can do it at a really low cost to a really high cost and everything in between. An example of low cost is putting bubble wrap on the windows. An example of high cost is taking out of your windows and putting in brand new double glazed ones. And then there's multiple in-between options that go from very low cost, but still a little bit of a cost, to sort of, you know, half the cost of new ones. I'll just mention that a third, if you have metal, so steel or aluminium frames, then a third of the heat moving through by conducting through the window is through the frame. So that's why if you're getting any new windows, it's really important to try and avoid anything metal. And also that double glazing or secondary glazing, any sort of air gap, won't reduce the amount of heat that comes into a room by direct sunlight. So for that, you really need external shading. With external shading, we are aiming to prevent the radiant heat from the sun coming through the windows and landing on our floors and couches and our bodies and heating us up. It can be made of anything, just like a draught, sealing a draught is about physically blocking a gap. Shading is about physically blocking the sun from the window. So it could be plants. Deciduous vegetation is the best, because as well as blocking that summer sun, you want it to be able to be pulled back in winter so that you can get as much summer sun in the windows as possible, because it's free heat. So a deciduous vine is perfect because it shelters you in summer but drops all its leaves and lets the heat through in winter. This is some shading made using some sheets. This is someone just hanging up some shade cloth with bulldog clips on the gutter. And this is an example of a material called Wren shade foil, which is just a perforated aluminium foil, and you can put it on a window with Velcro dots and it reflects a lot of the heat away. So they're all sort of, simple, lower-ish cost things you can do to get a hold of your, get a bit of control over excess summer heat. Appliances. What I thought I'd do is talk through the heating component, and then we might just take a 5-minute break if people need it. We also don't need to, but we'll see how people are going, just in case anyone wants to grab a cup of tea, which is very important. Okay, so appliances. Let's start with heating. Heating is basically the most important thing that we need to get right in Victoria because we're in a predominantly cold climate. According to Sustainability Victoria, for the average Victorian home, 43% of their annual bill will be for heating. Remember I said I use an energy rating tool when I do my energy assessments. That also estimates how much of the annual bill of a home is spent on heating. And sometimes it's up to 90%, depending on what the other things are that are being used in the home and how, if it's a big home and all of the areas are being heated, then it's going to be a really big cost. So it's just absolutely so important to have efficient heating, but also reduce the amount of heating you need in the first place by all those building shell things we've just talked about. As an example of the differing costs of different kinds of heaters, this chart will show that now these are space heaters. So that means they're just heaters heating a room. They're not ducted systems. But here we have the LPG, the gas, the bar heater, electric bar heater, and then here we have these reverse cycle air conditioners that you can see they're just so much more efficient than anything else. So that's going to be your best bet. A lot of people that I come across might have gas ducted heating or gas space heating or be using electric panel heaters or blower heaters, but they've also got reverse cycle air conditioners. It's just that they only think of them as being coolers because that's what they traditionally were. We used to have other types of heat and then use reverse cycle systems just for cooling. So sometimes it's as simple as just not using one thing and using your reverse cycle system, and that can save you stacks of money. Reverse cycle systems are known by a whole bunch of names. So I always include this slide because it can be really confusing when people talk about split systems in one sentence and then reverse cycle air conditioners in another sentence. And you might be wondering, are they the same thing or are they not the same thing? They are the same thing. So when people say a split system, what they are referring to is that it's split into two parts, an indoor part and an outdoor part. If they say a heat pump, then they are correct because reverse cycle air conditioners are heat pumps, and it may be that they're from New Zealand because if you're a New Zealander and you say you're going to turn on the heat pump, you mean the reverse cycle air conditioner. If you say I'm going to install an inverter in my home, then you probably also mean a reverse cycle air conditioner. These units use inverter technology to be more efficient. So all of these things are terms that people use, but they are all the same thing. What is a heat pump? The reason I want to explain this is because I think one of the two really big reasons why it's now more efficient to have an all-electric home is because of heat pump technology. The other reason is because the possibility of solar panels is so much more achievable and affordable now. But a really big one is heat pump technology. So I want to try and explain what it is. It's a form of technology that instead of using energy to generate heat, it's instead allowing us to collect free heat that's already in the air and just move it to where we want it. And the way it does this is using 3 natural processes. And this may be above and beyond what you are interested in learning. So just feel free to glaze your eyes over for the next couple of minutes. But it is interesting. So I already mentioned that heat always tries to move from where it's warmer to where it's less warm. Then there's refrigerant gas involved in a heat pump. And when gas is expanded, it gets cold. Like when you spray an aerosol can and then the top of it gets chilly. When you compress gas, like if you're pumping up a bike tyre, it gets warm. So heat pumps take advantage of these three different natural processes. And by compressing or expanding the refrigerant gas, it means that heat pumps can either absorb that heat or let it be lost into the outside air, whichever direction we want it to be. So I'll give a couple of examples. Fridges and freezers are heat pumps. And in that example, what they're doing is chilling the refrigerant gas by expanding it inside the fridge or the freezer. That means that any heat that might be lingering in the food that we've put in the fridge gets absorbed into that refrigerant gas because heat just naturally moves from where it's more warm to where it's less warm. So it goes into the refrigerant gas and then gets sent to the back of the fridge, and then it's compressed, which makes it warm, and then that heat moves into the air because, again, it's moving where it's less warm. So it's really very clever, and it's the only kind of technology that allows us to use energy in this way, where we're not actually generating heat, we're getting it free from the air. The other heat pumps we have in our homes are the reverse cycle air conditioners and also the heat pump hot water systems. So fridges, of course, we're using to cool, these we're using to heat, and these can go either way. Another way to look at it is that a plug-in electric heater is using that kilowatt of electricity to generate a kilowatt of heat energy. So it's just changing energy from one form to another, but it's not making it more. It can't give more heat than the energy it took in. Whereas heat pump heaters, they're using that kilowatt of energy to run the fan around the refrigerant gas, which pushes the outside air through the refrigerant gas and absorbs all the heat that's in it. And that means that you end up then with a much larger amount of heat energy going into your home. Now, people worry that what if it's 0 degrees? There won't be any heat in the air to be put into that refrigerant gas. Well, the thing is, we call it 0, but it's not a matter of there being no heat. In fact, there's heat in the air until -200. So 0 degrees is not a problem. There's still heat. It's not as much heat, definitely, but there's still definitely heat, and that's why these can work to, I know I'm in Hurstbridge, it gets to -5 and it still works fine, getting heat out of the air. In case you're confused by another thing, which I think is extremely confusing, the star rating systems for reverse cycle air conditioners and for gas space heaters are completely different. So you might have a 6-star gas heater and you might have a 2-star reverse cycle air conditioner. And you might be thinking, well, I'm better off putting the 6-star gas heater on because there's 6 stars instead of 2, which totally makes sense, I think. But the thing is that because gas heaters are directly generating heat, 6-star actually refers to it being 91% efficient. So it means it uses a unit of gas and it burns it, and 91% of that gets turned into heat energy and 9% just gets lost through the combustion process. Whereas because of this amazing heat pump technology, a 2-star air conditioner is 426% efficient. And that's the difference. So you can't compare the two. And I really hope that one day we end up making all of these things use the same scale. But to be fair, probably when they came up with that rating system for the gas heaters, we probably didn't have heat pumps doing the stuff that we've got them doing now. So yeah, things are just going to take a little while to catch up. Now, if you are thinking, okay, I'll look into reverse cycle air conditioners, there are different options. So this is the one everyone knows, just the single unit, often used for cooling, but can be used fantastically for heating. There's now quite a common option called a multi-head, where you have the same outdoor unit, but it can be connected to 4 or I think up to 6 indoor units. And each one of those indoor units has its own remote control. So it's very good for just comfort control, that each person in their room can have it at the temperature they need it at. And also different parts of the house are different. Like if it's the afternoon and you've got a west facing room, it's going to be a different temperature than the east facing room in the afternoon because the sun's coming through the west. So I feel like individual units are always going to be better for comfort control. But there is also the option of a ducted system. So this is the exact equivalent of any other ducted system, the gas ducted system. Well, I shouldn't say exact because the type of heat that comes out is a little bit different, but it means that you can have all of the areas heated. It is always going to be less efficient, and part of that is because of the ductwork. Any ductwork, even if it's brand new, is essentially trying to move warm air from one place to another place through a tube. And so, of course, you're going to get heat loss out of it. And how much heat loss comes out of it depends on the quality and the insulation of that tube that's moving it. So this is a good example of what happens to ductwork after about 20 years. It just starts failing and all the bits of plastic fall off. I can't remember if I told this story on Saturday, but this was actually a house I went to, and the owner had just had a brand new gas ducted heating system put in. And she said to them, this was the same week that I was there, she said to them, what about the ductwork? Should I replace the ductwork? And they said, no, that's fine. As long as it's not blowing cold air, she'll be right. And I went and had a look, and I didn't have to climb anywhere. I just opened the hatch to the underfloor space, and right in front of me, I could see this. And that ductwork is not okay. But often the people installing, it's so much easier for them just to whack in a new burner than it is to climb under the house and try and fix all that stuff. So, and I don't know, I can't quite believe it, but it seems like a lot of those installers don't actually know that matters. You can see these pictures on the right show where heat is being lost. So it's around all the joins. Usually they're not insulated at all. This bit's usually insulated, but you can see where that's cracked, that's then letting out heat. So the quality of the ductwork is super important. Is the very short way of saying what I said in a very long-winded way. The other thing about ducted systems is that you generally end up heating and cooling more space than you otherwise would, and it's just a bit harder for comfort control for the reasons I said before, that different parts of the home are different and also the people in them are different. So what's going to suit one, the temperature that suits one is not necessarily right for the other. Now, just in case you do have a ducted heating system or you're thinking about putting one in, I think it's really important to know how they're meant to work. So they're designed so that this unit here generates a certain amount of heated air, a volume, and that goes into the house. And all of the doors should be left open so that the same volume of air comes back to this return air vent and then goes back into the unit to be heated. So it's this balanced, even system with the same amount of air being blown out warm as is going back in cold. What happens, I see this all the time, is that people will have doors closed, like, their kids are 20 and they close the door because they want privacy, or there's someone working from home and they need the door closed for whatever reason. It might seem like it's okay, but what ends up happening is all the heat goes in those rooms, which is great, but it's too much heat. And then this return air is starving for air because it needs all that air back to reheat it. Because it's not getting it, it then starts to pull drafts in from outside to make up that volume of air. And then it goes back, and then more warm air goes into these rooms. So they just get hotter and hotter and hotter. Meanwhile, this place is cold and drafty. And so it's not uncommon for people to think that their ducted systems are not working properly, but it's not. They may be not working properly, but it's also quite possible that it's just the way that it's unbalanced. And if it's unbalanced, it can't do what it's meant to do. So that's really important to keep in mind if you are thinking about putting in a ducted system or how to use one.
What about with the vents? Like the house I've bought's got ducted gas heating, which I haven't really used, but like it's got vents in the bathroom and vents in the spare room. I mean, I've closed them all now and I'm not using it, but I just wondered about the difference of closing the vents in the rooms that you don't want to use.
Yeah, usually you can get away with closing some of them, and that should help. But each of these units, depending on the model number, if you can find a copy of the manual, it will tell you how many you can close without it potentially causing problems. Because if you imagine that this is blowing out a certain volume of air, if you cut off half the vents, then that means double the amount of pressure going to the rest of them. Okay. And that can sometimes be what causes the ductwork to split because it's not coping. But it should say on the manual, and sometimes they'll say, 10% of ductwork can be closed, and that's fine. So that would be a good way around it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Now, this particular unit is getting a lot of promotion at the moment because it's a possible way to replace an existing gas ducted heating system with a ducted reverse cycle system using the same ducts. Because if you already have a ducted gas system, it seems sort of crazy to throw out all that ductwork, right? So the thing with it is, though, that in many cases, the ductwork that you have won't be suitable. So if it's older than 10 or 15 years, or if any of the joins that join the bits of ducts aren't insulated, then it won't work. If you put in 5 years ago, if you put in a ducted system, then probably it might work because the insulation of the ducts would be the appropriate level is that what's required now, which I think is R1.5 insulation. So if you hear about this thing, just be aware that it can be possible if your existing system is pretty new, but it often isn't. The other thing is if they say, sure, we can put in this system, we need to replace the ducts, but we'll use all of the floor vents or the ceiling vents. Any system will do that. This one is not special in that. They will all reuse any existing vents in the floor or ceilings. So if that was the case, I also wouldn't go with this one because it's a much less known system. Whereas if you went for just a ducted system from a brand that's been there for a long time, like Panasonic or Daikin or Mitsubishi Electric or Heavy Industries, I'd probably think that was a better bet. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that in case someone comes across it and thinks, here's the perfect solution to everybody. Another thing that not everyone knows is that if you don't like these wall unit things, if you think they're ugly, then there are other options. One is that you can have a ceiling unit. It's called a ceiling cassette, or this is a floor mounted unit. And this is if you happen to be doing any renovating, or if you have a little, some sections of cavity in the roof that aren't, that are just sort of separate and aren't being used, you can install the reverse cycle bit there, and then all you see is the vent, and the heat and the cool comes out of that. So there are more options than a lot of people are often aware of. All right. This is where I'm going to try and explain the Victorian government rebate system. which is quite confusing. And I'm constantly being asked about it, how people know there are rebates, and they're like, but how do I know who to get them from and who's going to be good? So this is my attempt. Hopefully it will help you understand it. The Victorian government, we're actually really lucky to be here because we get more rebates for things than any other state that I'm aware of. So what they've got is, it's called the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program, and they're trying to encourage people to install things that are more energy efficient. And in order to give that rebate, they're using what's called Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates, and they're certificates that are worth money. And the Victorian government has a whole list of accredited products and has said how many VEEC certificates each one is eligible for, or what activity. Like if you move from this inefficient thing to this efficient thing, this is how many VEECs you will be eligible for. In order to manage this system, they have what's called accredited providers, and their job is to administer it all. So they have to collect the documentation that says this inefficient thing was taken out and this efficient thing was put in, and it was done by a professional plumber or electrician. So it's just all the paperwork basically behind it. But this is where it's gotten quite complicated, because when you go to the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program and try and find out who can give you a rebate, it will just list all of the accredited providers. But there's actually two types. One is they're all accredited providers, but there's one group of accredited providers that also have decided to install any product that has a rebate. I suppose it's because they're already in the industry and they're already creating these certificates, so they think, well, why don't we sell it as well? The problem that I see with that is that they're not companies that specialize in this product. They subcontract all of the work out because they're not installers. And I feel like that gives us less ability to get quality control and follow-up support when there's problems. The other thing is they are very much aimed at low-cost products with a high turnover. So because they manage the rebates, they pretty much say, okay, to put in, if I want to put in a heat pump hot water system, this is the rebate there'll be. So what can I sell that's going to be as close to $0 as possible so that I can offer it and get lots of people buying it? So when you have cold callers or door knockers or Facebook ads or people putting things in the letterbox, that's who it's going to be, is these guys, because they're trying to get as many sales as they possibly can. But then there's another kind of accredited provider. They're both the same. Their job is the same. Their original job was the same, I should say, is to administer the program. These guys say, we're perfectly happy with that. We don't want to do anything else. So we're going to connect with independent companies around the country who are already doing a good job of it. And we'll just tell them what documentation we need. They'll give it to us. Then we give them the rebate and they give it to the customer and everyone's happy. So that's the second option you have with an installer. You can either go with one of these guys or you can go with one of these guys. And if you possibly can, I would always recommend going with the second option, because their companies are already around. They've probably been installing this thing for way longer than a rebate was around. They've got a reputation to maintain. They're usually companies that, they might be down the road from you, whereas these ones probably don't even have a shop. Why would they? Because they're not installers. So the minute they go out of business, nobody can even find them again. Whereas these ones, they might have been in your community for a long time doing a very good job. So that's who I would suggest to go with. The one thing to mention is the cost will probably be different, but that's because these guys have aimed for the cheapest possible product they can install, whereas these ones won't touch that particular product because they don't want to have the hassles of problems or it breaking down or, that sort of thing. So these ones will probably be more expensive, but it's not because they don't get the same rebate. They do. It's just that the product was more expensive in the first place. Hopefully that explains that.
And can I just add something quickly onto here, because this made me understand it a lot better, and I think this came about from our big discussion on Saturday around this, because a few of us were a bit confused. So I want to share this, that if you want to do something, like for example, if you want to install a battery, right? Because I know that at the moment there's a lot of battery schemes happening. So if you want to install a battery, go and ask whoever you trust. Like if you have a preferred electrician that you trust or a preferred solar installer, whoever it is, go and ask them, can you install this for me? Rather than the person who, I know that there's been a lot of calls recently from, just from people saying, oh, do you want a battery? We're installing it in the area. We can come and have a look at your property. Go and actually ask someone that you trust. And then they most likely, because I've talked to quite a few tradies about this, they most likely will just pair up with one of the type 2, the AP type 2s, and then they will do the rebate for you. So just contact who you normally contact and see if they can do it. And if they don't do it, they'll probably put you onto someone else that they trust. Just so you can, there's always the option that you can go with option 1 if you want that for more of an easier option in terms of, you just know that they're going to do it. But if you have a preferred supplier or a preferred system that you want, because I know one of the people in the previous session, they were saying that, they wanted a specific type of battery. And so they went and said, oh, do you do this battery? So that's hopefully that also makes sense, that you could just go and ask the person that you normally ask.
And make use of community organisations like volunteer clean energy and sustainability groups. They've probably got their finger on the pulse of who does these things and who's going to do a good job of it. The trouble with this system is that people hear about the rebates and they go to the list on the Victorian Energy Upgrade site of accredited providers. And if you get just these guys and these guys, you're missing this entire group of independent installers. And so it becomes really confusing how you actually get it. Anyway, feel free to ask questions about that later on if you have them. I'll keep going on and then we might just have a little break after that as well. Just still on the topic of the reverse cycle air conditioning, part of the rebate that you can get at the moment is actually just the Victorian Energy Upgrades rebate. So there's no federal government rebate for this particular one. And then it depends very much on what your original system was and what you're installing. So because the rebates depend on the sort of the value of the efficiency improvement, the less efficient the thing you're taking out and the more efficient the thing you put in, the bigger the rebate, if that makes sense. So if you're putting in a wall-mounted unit, it can be a big range, and that's because this would be a rebate if you're not actually taking anything out at all, just for putting in a brand new wall-mounted reverse cycle air conditioner, and you get a $200 rebate just because it's a good thing to install. Whereas the $1,400 might be because you're taking out, say, a gas space heater and putting in a reverse cycle air conditioner. So you do need to, first of all, contact one of the installers and just get them to explain what the rebates would be for different things. The other thing is that if you're taking out something like a ducted gas heating system and putting in something else, you'll get a larger rebate for putting in a multi-head or a ducted system, because you get a large rebate and they're considered single units. Even though this has multiple indoor bits, it's only got one outdoor bit, so it's considered one unit. Whereas say if you took out a gas ducted heating system and put in 4 single wall-mounted units, you'd get a really good rebate off the first one, and then the others, the rebate would be less because they're considered multiple systems. So things like that is what your installer can help you with. And another good reason to choose one of the the local specialist companies is that they're going to try and get what's right for you. I've talked to so many people who have been pushed into getting a multi-head or a ducted system because it generates more rebate certificates, when actually their home is really small and they probably could have done with just one system, one large system. But if it's one of the accredited providers that are installing, they're just pushing everyone to get the largest system possible because it creates the most certificates. So a ballpark outlay depends what you're getting, but I mean, even before the rebates, I would have said just a small bedroom air conditioner would be about $1,800, and a larger one about $3,200, $3,500 or so. So depending what the rebates are and what you're uninstalling, that's roughly what you're looking at. And a good quality multi-head would be about 8,000-ish, but it depends, again, who installs it, what brand it is, and some other factors. There's a bunch of other things that you might consider when you're choosing what to do, besides the configuration of whether it's single, multi-head or ducted. Consider what you're going to be doing with your building shell, because the more you improve the building shell and the ability to keep the warm air in, the less large your system will have to be, because it'll generate the heat and the heat will just stay there, so it can cycle off. Whereas if you've got a really poor building shell and not thinking that you're going to be upgrading anytime soon, you'll need a larger system that can just continue to pump out heat to keep you to temperature. You want to try and get the right size. You don't want to undersize it, because then it will just end up a blowy unit that's constantly blowing, trying to create the right temperature and never quite getting there. But you also don't want to oversize it. So it is about getting the right mix. You probably want to think about where the inside and outside units are going to go, and just think about the neighbours a bit. Like, the outside units usually aren't terribly noisy, but depending on where it gets put, it can be a bit of a nuisance to the neighbours. So keep that in mind. Also to yourself, you won't necessarily want it in certain places that might bother you. All right, now I think I've already sent Prue. If anyone's interested in learning more about reverse cycle air conditioners, I've got a whole 1-hour recorded webinar that I did for our local council, and Prue's got the link, so she can send it around. If you want to learn about that, you can have a look. As well as these big appliances, it's also just a great idea to try and do what you can by heating your body. It's much cheaper to heat your body than to heat all the air in the room. And these days you've got all these fancy things, like we all know hot water bottles and wheat bags and electric blankets, but you can get all these fancy sort of vests, and this is my heated seat pad that goes on my office desk, which is my favorite thing, and heated blankets. So they're great. Also, when there's different, you know how often in a house some people are colder than others, so this enables you to keep the temperature maybe a bit lower, and the person that's cold can use one of these to help them. And the other thing that I wanted to mention as a this is suitable for renters, or as it's not necessarily low cost, because you can see on this slide that they're upwards of $400, but they are movable. So if you were renting, or if you need something that can move around your home, they're not a bad idea. A far infrared heater creates heat the same way as the sun does, and the best way to imagine it is if it's a cold winter's day but it's sunny, and you go and stand outside under the sun, you feel warm, but all the air around you is cold. And that's what this does. It will heat whatever is under it or whatever it's facing, but not the air in between. So it's quite suitable when you're sitting at a desk, or people will put them over their couch. So when they're sitting watching telly, they're actually heating the couch and their bodies, but it's not attempting to heat all the air in the room. So they're not, you wouldn't use them as a room heater. You would only use them to be facing you or something you want warmed up. All right. What do people think? I can keep going, or we can have a 5-minute break to have a cup of tea. What do you reckon? Break?
Yeah.
5-minute break. Okay. What's the time? Pretty sure it's 6:43. So what about if we come back at 6:50?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
See you then. Should we just wait for Carolyn?
Yeah, we can just wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, here you are. Carolyn, you're our special star. We're waiting for you to get back. All right. I shall keep going. I know I've got a cup of tea now, so hopefully you'll do too. I'll talk really briefly about cooling appliances. It's really not on anybody's minds at the moment, but ceiling fans are a good one to mention because they're quite useful in winter as well, especially if you have a high ceiling. What we usually recommend people have is a reversible ceiling fan. And what that means is in summer, it blows air down on you, which makes you cooler. But in winter, it reverses direction and pushes air upwards, which then moves the warm air that might have pulled in the high ceiling back into the room. So it's a really useful winter tool as well. As well as, yeah, summer can give you a 3-degree cooling effect. Evaporative cooling, if you do have that, is energy efficient. It can use a fair bit of water. So it depends whether you have less water or less energy to run something. The other thing is I think they're becoming less and less appropriate for our weather because we're getting more humidity and more sort of extremes of weather, and evaporative cooling is quite limited to sort of moderate heat. It's fine for that if it's a dry, moderate heat, but if it's humid or really hot, it's probably not going to be enough, and you'll need some sort of reverse cycle air conditioner as well, or refrigerative cooling. If you do have reverse cycle air conditioning, don't be afraid to use it for cooling as well as for heating. They are efficient to use. Whether it's heating or cooling, the way we use our appliances and the way we behave in our homes is really important. One of the key things is setting the thermostat. So you've probably heard this before, that the best temperature to aim for in winter is 18 to 20 degrees. So you still want to be wearing jumpers and, maybe have your heated seat pads or blankets. You want to be feeling like it's winter, but you just don't want to be freezing. And in summer, 24 to 26 degrees is good. So you'll still feel like it's summer. You'll still be wearing cool, loose clothing, but it's taken the edge off. So that's what you're aiming for in conditioning, is not creating a situation where it's as if you're in a different season. Dressing appropriately for the season. We've already mentioned heating by zone or cooling by zone, and closing off areas you don't need to heat, because every extra bit of space you're heating or cooling is using energy. Also cleaning filters. This picture at the right, you might recognise, it's very dirty filters from a reverse cycle air conditioner. They're very easy to clean. Usually you just pop these little tabs at the front of the machine and open up the flap and then pull out these filters, wash them with warm soapy water, dry them and put them back. You don't need to call a service technician or anything for this job. It's very, very easy to DIY, and it makes a really big difference. So this particular air conditioner, if it was trying to put out warm or cold air with that much dust on it, it would have been very hampered, because it's trying to get air through those filters, which is going to use a lot of energy and not be very good at it. If you happen to have solar panels on the roof, then even if it's not super cold or super hot in the day, it's quite okay to preheat or pre-cool during the day when the solar's running, because it's free, and that way you're sort of setting your home up that when the solar isn't running and it's peak rates, you need less energy. So for example, if you come home from work at 5 o'clock and it's been a really hot day, and then you put on the air conditioner and try and cool the house down, it's going to use a lot more energy than if you had it automatically timed to go on at 11 a.m. and has been running, during the day using free energy. And anything you do to your building shell to improve it will reduce your heating and cooling costs. With hot water, it's actually our second largest cost, usually. Not in every house, it depends what you have, but typically it's our second largest annual cost in a home. And this chart from Sustainability Victoria does a comparison of costs of all different kinds of ways to heat our hot water. The most expensive is just the standard electric resistive heater, which hot water heater, which just means it holds hot water and uses an element like a kettle to heat up that water, and that's super expensive. Solar hot water with a gas boost is cheap to run, and so is a heat pump. Generally, even though those are both good options, if you're installing something new, I would install a heat pump, partly because if you have solar panels on the roof, you can time your heat pump to heat when you're generating electricity. And also, if you have limited roof space, then you're leaving it for solar electricity, which you can use for the heat pump. But if you don't need to heat your water, you can use it for whatever you want. Whereas a solar hot water system is going to use some of your precious roof space. If you already have a solar hot water system, though, don't worry, it's very efficient. You'll probably notice if you start looking at heat pump hot water systems that there are two different sort of designs. Both of them have a tank and some sort of part that's the condenser unit, just like the condenser unit for a reverse cycle air conditioner. This is the bit that has the fan and the refrigerant and is pushing air through that refrigerant. The one that's in two parts is called a split system, and the one that over here, it still has those two parts, but in this situation, the condenser is stuck to the top of it. The condenser of both must be outside, which means this whole unit has to be outside because they're joined. Whereas in this case, this part could be outside, and theoretically, this tank could be inside if you wanted it to be. Some people do actually have the hot water tank inside in a cupboard, say in a laundry or the bathroom. It's not that common these days, but if you do, that's an option. The split system is typically a little bit more expensive, a bit quieter, a bit more efficient, and the all-in-one has a smaller footprint. So if you're, say, taking away a gas storage tank hot water system, you might decide on an all-in-one system because it just goes in the exact same spot and you don't need to find any more space. The size of the tank is worth considering and working it out for yourself as well, because some of those installer type ones, the accredited providers that install these, will try and talk people into a size purely because it's the only size their brand has, rather than that it's the right size for the household. So work it out for yourself based on this rule of thumb. And don't worry if you run out of hot water. Any hot water system you've had potentially could run out of hot water, but it will reheat, and a heat pump is just the same. So the only exception, I suppose, is because they have timers on them, you might decide to time it to only heat, for example, when you're generating solar electricity. If you did that, and then that night 10 people came and had a shower, you'd run out of hot water, and it had been timed not to start reheating until 11 o'clock the next day. So that might not work so well. But most of them have an app that you've got on your phone, and you can actually tell it to boost itself. So there's pretty good control of them these days that make sure you've got the heat where you want it. You get a few extra rebates with the heat pump hot water system. You do get the Victorian Energy Upgrade VEEC certificates, but you also get federal government certificates, and you also can potentially get the Solar VIC rebate. Now, these two, the STCs and the VEECs, the state and the federal, they're not means tested. They're for, well, this is anyone in Australia and this is anyone in Victoria. So anyone can get those ones. The solar Vic rebate is means tested, but it's quite a generous means testing. And I think as a rule of thumb, it's something like your home has to be less than $3 million and you have to earn less than $210,000 a year. So that means that many of us fall into that category as being eligible. And if you are eligible, you can get $1,000 off the cost of your heat pump hot water system, or $1,400 if buying an Australian made one. So you can get all of those rebates together. It's not that if you get one, you can't get the others. It's, it's great. Like I said, we're lucky being in Victoria to get all of these things. The rebate, just like the reverse cycle air conditioners, depends on what your original system was and what you're installing. So if you happen to have an electric hot water system, the resistive kind that uses the element, and you're putting in a heat pump, you'll get the biggest rebate because you've gone from the least efficient to a very efficient option. And then other than that, the rebate, well, I've said the rebate depends on who installs your system, but that's actually, I've written that wrong, because the rebate will be similar, but the out-of-pocket cost will depend on who installs your system. The final out-of-pocket cost, usually energy assessors will talk about them as being in 3 rough price tiers. This is for a heat pump hot water system. If you're getting one of the cheap ones from the accredited providers who install, it could be anything down to $200 up to $1,000, and generally they're the only ones that will install them. Then if you're going to one of the local heat plumbers or electricians or companies that have been around doing it, they'll only deal with these ones, either medium cost, which is perfectly fine, or the high-end one. These are like buying the Rolls-Royce. They're absolutely amazing. They're more efficient. They work to a lower temperature. They recover quicker. So if you use all the water, they recover quicker. There's all sorts of great things about them, but they can be quite expensive, anywhere, up to $6,000-7,000 out of pocket. These ones are medium. They're still good quality. You'd probably be paying something like $2,000 out of pocket after the rebates, and that would be a good model. There's also a bunch of things to consider with a heat pump hot water system, and there's also a recording of a 1-hour webinar you're very welcome to listen to on my council's website. It's just free for anyone to listen, but you'd be thinking about things like the noise, and everything, it has to be about you. So for example, it's going to make a little bit of noise when it's heating, just like the noise of the outdoor part of a reverse cycle air conditioner. And if that's happening in the daytime, it might not matter whatsoever because you're not even there. But if it's happening at nighttime, if that's how you've timed it, then you definitely don't want it outside your bedroom window. So you see how I mean? It's important to know who you are and what you're actually planning on doing with things to make sure you get the right choice for you. Refrigerant gas, warranties, efficiency, timers, location, all of these things come into play, and you can learn more about that in the webinar. It's definitely worth checking, especially your shower heads. Taps are important, but a lot of taps we sort of need water, like if it's there's tap in the sink, you need water to just come out so you can fill up your sink to wash the dishes. If it's hand taps, it's worth having some sort of limiting on them so they're not letting out too much water all at once. And shower heads are definitely very important because some showers, especially older showers, they can be up to 30 litres a minute of the water that they let out, which means it's not going to take that long to empty a whole tank of water. Whereas what we recommend is a Wells 3-star shower head that uses about 8 litres a minute. So that's what I'd be aiming for. You can get even more water efficient ones than that, like 4 or 5 litres a minute. I'm not suggesting that because I actually don't think they're very nice shower. So when I say Wells 3-star, please don't think that I'm telling you to have one of those ones that it feels like it's just spitting rain and that's all. Nobody wants that kind of shower. But 8 litres a minute is pretty reasonable. Lagging the pipes, lagging is a fancy word for this black stuff, which is really just foam insulation, and it goes over all of the pipes between the hot water system and, at the very least, the wall. If you've got a good plumber, they'll actually put it all the way through the house and right to where your shower is. But at the very least, they should do it to the wall because it's hot, it's keeping the heat in the water where you want it. And then one of my little pet things is having mixer taps angled to cold, because mixer taps are everywhere now and people tend to just leave them in the middle, which means when you flick it up to just get a glass of water, say, you're already drawing hot water out of the tank without it ever reaching or even having a chance of reaching the outlet. But then it just cools down in the pipe, so it's a real waste. All right, induction cooking. Once you've done your heating and your hot water, often the next thing to think about is induction cooking, or cooktop, I should say. This is if you're trying to move away from gas and onto electric things. These two plates look sort of the same, don't they? But, excuse me, the difference is this one is resistive electric. And what that means is it has an element that heats up, then that heats the pan, and the pan heats the water. This one is an induction cooktop. This thing, this circle, won't heat up at all unless you put a pan on it, and then it will heat the pan, which heats the water. So induction cooking is different. If you haven't used it and you're curious, you can probably get yourself a portable plug-in induction cooktop just to give it a shot. Some libraries rent them out, and maybe you can ask your library if they would do that. It's worth having a play because it's a really nice way of cooking. A lot of people don't want to leave gas because it's also a nice way of cooking, but once you've gone to induction, it's a bit hard to turn back. It's very, very reactive and fast. You can boil water extremely quickly. It's safer because there's not a hot element to touch. It's easy to clean because nothing's being baked on. It is true that not all cookware is compatible, but a very large amount of it is. You just need to get a fridge magnet and stick it on the back of a pot or pan. And if it sticks, then it's fine for induction cooking. Power requirements. You will need to have a separate circuit for your induction cooktop. It's just how it is. But an electric oven would need one as well. So it's no different to that. The benchtop can be a problem, especially if you have a stone benchtop or marble benchtop, because once they're cut, they've changed some rules recently, which means you can't just go cutting into a stone benchtop anymore. It's got to be done really carefully. You can still do it, but that can be a bit of a stumbling block because then you need a stone cutter to do a really good job of it. I'll mention a pacemaker is a thing. If you happen to have a pacemaker, you're meant to stay a certain distance from it because it uses magnetic forces. And there is a rebate for induction cooktops. All the text there is just what I'm going to talk to you about now, so don't worry about trying to read it. These are creative ways people have dealt with benchtop issues. So this one here, they've had a gas cooktop and the cutout was too big for their new induction cooktop, so they've added some timber to sit it in. This one was a stone benchtop And instead of cutting into the stone, they've just created a raised platform of wood and put the induction cooktop into it. This one was a combined gas cooktop with electric oven, and they've just left the electric oven, put some wood on top and put the induction cooktop into it. So that means rather than having to spend thousands replacing the whole thing, they could just do the part that mattered. And this one, there's actually a gas cooktop under there, and she's abolished gas from the house and taken off all the bits and pieces of the gas cooktop, put on some marine ply that she's painted, and this is a plug-in portable 2-burner induction cooktop. For some people, that's all they need. They don't even need to go and install this whole fancy thing. So there's lots of ways around it. I've got a few slides on solar and battery storage, and not much at all. But just as a quick overview, if you're thinking about getting solar panels, a rule of thumb is that it costs about $1,000 per kilowatt of output for a system. There's no real way to say everyone should have this size system or this size system is enough for an all-electric home, because houses are so different and the way we use them is different. So it's worth getting a really reputable solar installer who you trust to come and have a look at your energy profile for over a year and see what sort of appliances you have, and then help you work out what you need to fit that. For example, if you have a pool and you're running any sort of heating, or even just the pool pump uses a lot of energy, so that will impact how much rooftop solar you want. Battery storage, there's a new rebate, federal government rebate, not means tested, so anyone can get it. But it gives you a very nice rebate off the cost of battery storage. So that's worth investigating. It's not going to suit everybody, but it does mean for a lot of us that rather than waste the energy we generate during the day when we're out at work, we can store it in a battery and then use that when we come home instead of getting peak power. The other thing that it's worth mentioning is this bidirectional charging for an EV, an electric vehicle. That we've just had all of the boxes ticked and everything to say that we're allowed to have bidirectional charging with electric cars here. And now it's just at the point where the manufacturers are working out exactly what sort of equipment they're going to be offering us. But what it means is that if you're thinking you might get an electric car in the next while, make sure you get one that has the capacity for bidirectional charging, because that way, once all the equipment is set up to do it, you can just plug it straight in. All right, a few extra resources. There's an excellent download from Sustainability Vic. It's a free household energy action guide, just to give you a few tips on what you can do, and you can see it compares cost, effort and savings of the different things, so worth having a look at. There are green home loans and also green personal loans that you can get that help you. If like the green home loans are often focused on you having just a more energy efficient home. So you might get a lower rate off your entire home loan, or a green personal loan might be more about saying, I want to install solar panels, but I'd like to get a lower rate loan to do that. You can apply for these yourself through all of the different lenders, or you can go to a broker who specialises in that, such as this one. There's a couple around, and the main thing about a broker is you're not paying the broker because they get paid by the banks. So they're quite a good resource to be able to give you some insight into what might work best for you. It is definitely worth having an idea what's going on in your home with energy. There's a couple of ways you can do it. This one on the left, you can get through any energy distributor. So that's like AusNet or PowerCore. I'm not sure who it is actually for you guys, but they all have a free portal that you can log into using the info from your energy bill, and that will show you what's going on day by day, and you can compare months and years to each other. But then there's also this option. This is an in-home energy monitor that is free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. You can get one attached to your meter box, and they connect it to an app on your phone, which gives you a moment-by-moment view of what's going on energy-wise in your home. See here, this red bit, you also set them up to show when you're on, this is peak energy times, all the rest is off peak. So you can say, there's this big bump here, what is that? And is it something that I could be running here when I'm on off peak time or when I'm generating solar? So they're a really good way of planning what's going on. There's great information at the yourhome.gov.au manual. There's an actual book that you can buy, or you can go online and download every page of it as individual PDFs on different topics. And it's such a good resource. It will explain anything you want to know about. Sustainability Victoria is really useful too, and has lots of great comparative charts on the costs of different things. And Renew is a not-for-profit organisation that focuses on everything that we've just been talking about: efficiency, comfort, solar, everything. So they have really good information. And last but not least, definitely use your council as a resource. You can contact Prue to find out whatever or make requests. And you can use those energy kits that the libraries have, that I presume were provided by Corangamite Shire. And yeah, maybe if you just get in touch with Prue and make sure she can let you know if there's other events coming up. And that's actually me. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now. I might stop sharing and then I'll be able to see if there's any messages in the chat. There might not be, because hopefully you've asked them already. I can see something in the chat. Oh, Dawn. I'm glad you could be here, Dawn. And don't worry about the camera. There's always something weird happens to these technical things. Prue and I made sure we got on early so that we could troubleshoot the presentation and make sure it was working. Oh, thank you, Dawn. I'm glad it was useful and that you can come to the webinar next Wednesday. That's fantastic. And Beck is typing something. You got any more questions, Carolyn? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, while you're unmuting, Carolyn, Beck's saying any fire danger with insulation. So insulation should be rated as safe. Like any ceiling insulation you purchased would have considered that. So it shouldn't be flammable. Is that what you meant, or was that in relation to something else, Beck?
I do know, Lucinda, in the session on Saturday, you were talking about how you can buy, like if Beck, you're worried about how Lucinda said to leave a bit of space around the downlights. There's like the downlight covers that you can get, and just like to make sure that you leave a little bit of space. But the insulation should say that to do that. And also if you're getting it done by a professional or getting your something like an electrician to look at something, they should know that and do that.
But that is a very good point, and I didn't even think of that aspect of it. So yes, if you have downlights, recessed downlights, or other things installed in the roof like exhaust fans, then there are requirements of how much gap needs to be left, or the downlights can have fire rated covers put on them. So now I'll just see, Carolyn had a question, then I'll get back to Kathy.
And it was also on insulation. When you had that screen up, there was an insulation website, and I didn't get a chance to write it down. There was a or something about, there was a website, something about specific insulation.
What was that? I can. Is this?
It
was to for someone to install it, or was it just information?
I just wanted to get a bit more information. As I said, I only bought my house last year, and I don't really know what's up there and what I should be looking for or whatever.
Yeah. So first of all, we'll be sending these slides around, so you'll be able to look back on those.
Okay.
If you still think there's something missing, let Prue know, and she can ask me, and we'll try and figure out what it is.
Yeah, right.
And the other thing is, if you have any tradespeople coming to your home, they've all been trained to get up ladders and looking. Just get them to take some photos. And if they take a few photos showing not just one small piece of the roof, but sort of, looking over, you can even send them to me, and I can have a look and go, this looks like roughly this, because I've seen so much insulation.
Yeah, right.
And it is hard to know. And the other thing is, you might be able to borrow one of those thermal cameras and have a look and see.
That. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is, if a tradie says, oh, your insulation's fine, I wouldn't necessarily believe them, because a lot of them don't seem to have any clue what is fine and what's not. Is that the answer to your question?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, Kathy's saying, is there an advantage to having a hot water tank inside? And you're back from Saturday, Kathy. Wow, that's great. There's not really an advantage to having the tank inside. I mean, I suppose it might lose less heat just out of the tank, but a tank should be very well insulated anyway. Generally, people prefer their tanks to be outside just so they have their inside space free to use. So generally, if I see someone who has had a tank inside, they're aiming to get it moved. But yeah, there's no particular advantage, I don't think.
That's great. Thanks for that.
Yeah, good. I mean, thinking about hot water tanks inside or outside, sometimes people will also say, is it better to have the outside part of a reverse cycle air conditioner in the shade or in the sun, or, on this side of, and it's true that there might be very minor differences in efficiency in one place or another, but you're already moving to the most efficient option there is. And I feel like most of the time where you put something, it's better just to think about where it's going to suit you better. If it's probably, if you're wanting an air conditioner for cooling, it's probably better not to have it on the roof in full sun. But on the other hand, if there's nowhere else to put it, just put it there. It's still going to be really efficient, if you know what I mean.
Actually, I've got another question that I just thought of.
Yeah.
You can get those. You can get covers for the
evaporative cooler.
No. With a split system.
Yeah.
With a split system, the bit outside.
Yes.
Kind of, if it's in a spot and it looks a bit out of place, you can get covers to put over them. Does that
You mean like a timber slatted cover?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
In general, you don't want to do that, because the way they work is by cycling fresh air through the unit, and you really don't want to block that in any way. So you also don't want to install one, say, in a corner between two walls, because it's reducing the way that air can flow. And those covers are often, they're sold because people think their units are ugly and they want to cover them, but they're actually making them work less well. So I'm sorry to say that despite it looking better, it's probably not going to do you any good. Yeah. All right, Dawn may be typing. Is anyone else? Oh, yes, Dawn saying I'm from the UK and our hot water tanks. Oh, and in an airing cupboard near or in the bathroom. That is a great idea. Ha! Great for airing clothes in the winter and warming up your towels. And I wonder if that's a particular design then, that they're designed to let out a bit of heat for that extra purpose. I don't really know. But yeah, you've got me thinking now, so I'll have to I'll have to keep that in my mind and work out whether, you know, I think probably because of the climate we are in compared to there, it's just not so relevant for here. Yeah. Not so good in summer, Kathy's saying yes. I guess in the UK that's probably 18 degrees, so it's all right.
I have a question about because one of the issues with my place, because I'm in a little rental and you know it's not perfect, but one of the issues I have is condensation on the windows. And yeah, I'm a little bit worried about it, especially more so because it's a rental. If it was my own place, you know, you can sort of do a bit more about it. But what do you think about getting dehumidifiers, like either just like sort of the small little like disposable ones or a big proper dehumidifier machine? Or
so a few things. It's about there's a few aspects to it. One is about being aware of how much moisture you're putting into the air and trying to reduce that where you can. So you can't stop breathing, you can't stop having showers and things, but you can make sure you use the exhaust fan whenever you have a shower, and use the range hood, not dry clothing inside. I know a lot of people like doing that. And in winter, sometimes, you know, what choice have you got if it's raining for weeks? But if you can possibly avoid doing that, that's one of the main reasons for moisture coming inside. So there's that. Then things that you do to your windows could really help, like some of the secondary glazing options, creating an air gap. They reduce, because what's happening with the condensation is that it's very cold meeting with very warm, which means that it's precipitating the moisture in the air, which if you have if you have an air gap, that reduces the difference in temperature, so that can really help. And then by all means, a dehumidifier, I think they're actually brilliant. And I've got 3 young adults living at home still. And what we've discovered is if they do, say they do their washing at midnight, which could happen, then they can hang it out in the bathroom. We've just got a rack in there and we've got another one hanging over the shower. They hang all their clothes out, put the dehumidifier on, and by morning their clothes are dry and there's 3 litres of water in the dehumidifier.
Wow.
So they're actually quite multi-purpose, because they keep going, Mum, let's get a clothes dryer. And I don't want one. I don't need one. We've never had one. So they're sort of at least partway happy now, because they have at least an option for when they're disorganized and they need their clothes dry. Yeah. So I'd get one, but I wouldn't get a cheapo. I wouldn't get a really cheap one. The good ones, the desiccant humidifiers, are about $500, which I know is a lot, but they're very robust and it should be good for a long time. And they basically just collect all the water in the bottom and you tip it out and put it back. But they're amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
And
good.
then, because it's a rental, if you leave, you just take it with you. You've still got it.
Yes, exactly. Which, I sort of, like the idea of that.
Yeah,
and then
for
wherever
sure.
I can go, I can use it. And because like the exhaust fan in the bathroom is not great. So then it's like, well, you know, I can't really do much about that, like being a renter. But then getting a dehumidifier is something I can do about. And a big issue I have is drying the clothes inside, because there's a clothesline outside, but well, it's in the worst spot. It's actually in shade almost all day, and then if it's raining,
really?
and
So that's terrible.
very poorly designed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Look, go with the dehumidifier and the racks in the bathroom, and it's amazing. Our kids use it constantly now. Sean and I hang our clothes outside because we're, old-fashioned. And the kids hang them in there. But, honestly, if they're doing their washing and hanging it out, I don't care where they put it. Not going to have that fight. Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you. It's been really awesome.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
That's great. Hopefully you'll all be able to think of some simple things to do in your homes, and hopefully you can come to the next 2 sessions too, because there's a lot in them. It's each little subtopic has so much in it.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great.
You're very welcome. So we'll be sending this through, and you can have a look again. You can send it to friends. I suppose it'll be on the council website, will it? So people can.
Yes, hopefully we can
later.
put it up on the website. Yes, I'm hoping that.
You got to work out how first.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so then everyone can be able to access it, which I think would be really good. Yeah.
All right. Great. Well, thanks for your time tonight. And if you haven't had dinner, enjoy your dinner.
Thank you. See you Wednesday.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.